Okay, welcome everybody to the, what is this, the August FileMaker, Kentuckiana FileMaker Developers Group. This month we're meeting to talk about the FileMaker Data API, and we have Mark DeNyse from Driftwood Interactive, and he's going to be doing a presentation for us. I did want to take a moment for anybody who might be catching this on YouTube. We would love to have you in person, so don't be shy. Come by and join us. We meet every third Tuesday of the month. You can check us out on kyfmp.com, and there'll be a link in the description as well. So love to see you. Don't be timid. We love the citizen developer as well as the professional. So everybody's invited. So with that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Mark and talk about some data API.
Quick correction,
Okay.
It's the fourth Tuesday of the month.
Did I say the third?
Yeah.
Oops. Thanks, Alan.
It's off by one, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Ron. So again, I'm Mark DeNyse from Driftwood Interactive. And in a nutshell, I created fmPDA 2017, so it's been a few years. It was more of a challenge, actually. Like, I was at a DevCon, and this gentleman came up to me and said, well, they just deprecated the whole, PHP API thing. What are we going to do now? I was just sitting there going, well, I don't know. What are we going to do? And so on the plane back from, I forget where it was, but I sketched out on the plane the whole idea of how fmPDA could work. And a week later, I had the prototype up and running. So it wasn't really that difficult. And if you've ever looked at the code, it's all there. It's not really rocket science, but it just took a little time to map everything between the two. I don't know the crowd here, how much, has everybody used PHP and fmPDA, or? Not sure. Okay, well, anyways.
Maybe it's just me, but
I know Beverly knows all this, so not worrying about that.
Yeah.
I'm going to start sharing my screen if that's okay. Oh, if I can. Ron, can you turn on permission for me to share?
Yep, sorry about that. Give
No
me
problem.
one moment here. Okay, you should be good to go now.
Okay. Let's see. Oops. Sorry. My Mac is saying I must do stuff. Oh, I apologize. I got to quit Zoom and come back. I'll be right back.
Okay. I guess I'll have to do some editing on today's video.
Where in the countryside is he transmitting from?
I don't know. I didn't check. I didn't ask him where he's coming from.
He lives in Massachusetts.
Oh, yeah, that's right. All right, he's coming back in. He was. What happened? Oh, here it comes again.
All right. Sorry about that, folks.
There you go. Okay,
Sorry about that.
no problem.
The darn Mac wanted permissions for Zoom, and then it made me restart the app and blah, blah, blah. All right. Let's see if this works better. Okay.
There we go.
There we go.
We got
All righty. So this is the web page. This is everything I'm going to show you is built into the package that you can download. So there's no new stuff in that respect. But fmPDA kind of, again, came out of that one suggestion from the gentleman about what do we do? And I didn't want to rewrite a lot of the code that I already had. So I figured out how we could just create an upper layer that, was method level compatible with what the old PHP API was and just map all those calls down into the data API. And it really wasn't that difficult. And out of it, we came really there are three layers to it. There's the fmPDA layer, which is the method level compatibility layer, the data API layer, which you can use straight up just as it without never dealing with the old code if you want to. And then there's the curl layer underneath. It's kind of all inherited classes in PHP. So there are some limitations. There are a few things that just don't work, that don't map into the data API. But for the most part, they do, and that's great. For most people that have used this, they've told me it takes less than an hour of coding, typically, just to make the coding changes. Debugging is another thing, of course, but it typically doesn't take that long to make those changes. So I haven't had to really change the versions or upgrade the code in years because it just keeps continuing to work, and FileMaker hasn't made any real dramatic changes to the data API as well. So that's good. So this is a kind of a quick little overview of what you would need to do is just kind of change your old requires to a new one wherever you put it. And as you can see in here, scroll down. So instead of doing a new FileMaker, you do a new fmPDA, and you're really kind of off to the races at that point. Most of this stuff, again, is supported, especially since FileMaker 18, which seems so long ago, but that was the last time they really made any big changes. If anybody wants to jump in questions, feel free to. I'm just going to otherwise just keep on chugging through. The big one you would probably need to change is the error call, just how the error handling is done. But again, that's almost a global search and replace in most people's code, so it's not a big deal, or at least so I found. I personally use this every single day in production code, both the fmPDA layer and just the data API layer. I try to write new code just using the data API, just because you can remove that extra layer and get a little performance boost. So demo-wise, this is all built into the download. So if you wanted to do a simple little call like this of listing databases, and again, this is the existing code that you've used for years. When you run it, boom, there you go. It came back with one little demo thing. And this is that log thing that Ron was talking about that I personally used to debug the whole thing initially. So you can see right here, that was the get call that went out to the database. And then the response came back right here. So it's just a blob of JSON, and then the code just parses it out and we just dump it to the log. And so you can do, pretty much all the typical stuff, get records, and woohoo, there's lots of data that comes back, adding finds. So again, it's pretty much a method level compatible system. And Ron will like to see this, I'm sure, is a container data thing. And there we go, there's Daffy Duck that comes back. So
yeah, that's what I wanted to see. Now I just got to figure I got to work on mine. But
right, and literally it is just those two lines of code. So you have to obviously have gotten a container URL from somewhere. So you've done a get data, or you've retrieved the record already. That's the catch. So
okay,
we back that up. Let's see. Maybe that can't be what I'm missing, because I'm still having problems with your demo as well.
Well, let me pull up some code here and we can take a quick peek in. So where is my get container? I'm looking right at it and I'm missing it. Ah, there we are. Yeah, so you do your new fmPDA, blah, blah, blah. You do a get record by ID. I'm just hard coding something in there for the moment. And we get back the record. And then I'm asking for the URL from the photo field, which is just normal. And then we just pass it off, and that's it.
Okay, yeah, that's nothing that I didn't I was thinking I might have misunderstood something, but yeah, I'm getting the record and I'm able to see by looking at the raw JSON that's returned. I'm able to see the URL and everything, so
the big thing with containers is the cookies, and I've tried to hide all that down below so that you never have to mess with it, because sometimes it needs to make 2 calls because of the cookie jar, and it's just one of those things. This is why web pages just, it doesn't work well in a web page. It's just trying to grab an image and displaying it inline. You pretty much have to pull the image out, store it somewhere temporarily, and then have your web page code to render it, because the cookies just get a little confused, and it depends on your browser and sometimes your proxy servers. It's a shame they didn't make it easier, but it is what it is. So we just have to work with it.
could you indulge me
So-
to run each one of those samples?
There's a lot of samples. I mean,
No, just
woo!
the 3 image samples we were just looking at,
Okay, that was
the get container.
Yeah.
1, 2, and 3.
So there's the raw data just coming back. It's a PNG file. That's Daffy.
Yeah.
He looks a little scrambled. And if I run it again, I downloaded it just to a file. And then the third one we already ran with Daffy.
I am seeing I'm seeing all that data in the raw data, so I don't know, it just still anyway, we can follow up with that later.
Okay. But in a perfect world, that's just the way it works. Now, again, I'm doing this. The server is actually here in this office, but it's not on my machine. So it's definitely a good test of an external source with its own SSL security and stuff. So where should we go from here? So again, pretty much works right out of the box. The nice thing that I've done with this is that you can start out using the higher level fmPDA code, and then right smack in the middle of your code, you can shift gears and go straight into the data API code. There's no reason you can't do that, because the lower levels are maintaining everything for you, the token management, all that. Yeah, the token management, that's always a fun one. That kind of throws some people at the start of, a lot of people will log in, do a request, and log out. And that thrashes the server because you're throwing away your session data when you do that. It is always best to, if you're going to make lots of calls, don't log out. Just let the token and the session time out on its own. Server can handle it. The fmPDA code handles it well.
And the fmPDA code, that by default, when you retrieve your data, it's storing that token in the session, correct? So the next time that you make a call,
Yes,
using that same token.
Right, which is great when it's the same PHP session. What if you have a busy server and you've got 10, 20, 30 users all on their own? They're all going to create their own sessions, and so you're going to have 30 tokens being stored, and that's going to stress out the server a little bit. And if there's security involved, then you pretty much have to do that. But if you're just hitting some generic database that there's nothing special about who's really logged in, because you're all kind of logging in with the same account on the back end, what I've done for some cases is we store the token off on the web server, but tucked away where nobody can see it. So there's just one token for all those sessions. And so the first one in creates the token and stores it, and then the next session coming in looks to see if the token's there and reuses that one. And fmPDA is built to allow you to do that pretty easy. You literally just pass a file path, and fmPDA will store the token in that file path for you on the server. And so that keeps you down to just one session per server, which really helps. And again, as long as there's no security issues, that's fine. So really depends on what you're doing. So I could run through all the demos here, but again, they're all built in. You can look at them anytime you want. And it's nice to be able to actually just run them and see what data does get returned. So like, get record by ID. So, there's just a nice little simple test of, I got record 55555, and, that was missing, but this one, get record 1, came back with all this beautiful little data tucked away in there. So it's a great way to just debug and figure out what's going on in the data API too.
So one of the things that kind of tripped me up a little bit when I first started working with fmPDA and setting it up, like finding the demos in the package and uploading them to my servers, but then the files within the, what is it? It's like V0, V1, V2, like you have to go into each one of those and put your database server.
Yeah, it's a demo.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to tweak it a little bit. There's only so much I could do to help you guys on that.
Yeah.
And the admin API one is also, it's got its own little host thing. The admin API is still at version 1. I never actually upgraded it to version 2 and beyond because there wasn't much demand for it, and there are much better tools for doing that anyways. So it was more just a test to see, could we really do that? And it made me factor the code better. So the layers that we were building up for everything was more separated and such. So I could ramble on forever about this, but if anybody's got specific questions they want to talk about, I'm all ears. More problems or anything like that.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Jeremy.
I've enjoyed your presentation. It seems like fmPDA brings something significant and something that was missing to the FileMaker community. What do you think is the future of this software? What do you think is its significance? And what do you think it really brings to FileMaker? I haven't worked a lot with APIs with FileMaker, so this is a relatively new concept to me.
Okay. Well, the data API is just a standard REST API that FileMaker built. The purpose of fmPDA was to save a bunch of people time in recoding projects that already existed, because your clients just want it to work, and they don't want you rewriting all that code to work with the data API directly. And so this was a smooth way to do that, minimal coding time. But the future is clearly not the PHP API layer anymore. It is the data API layer. And that's where you should always be writing new code to. It's going to be faster. It's going to be more efficient, better for the server. It's just better all around.
And is that the API that FileMaker essentially sells, or Claris sells? Is, you can do 600 gigabytes, 1200 gigabytes. Is that's where the future is? Okay.
Yep. And honestly, I have never heard of anybody hitting those limits. Sure, someone has, but in my practical experience, and we're pulling data all the time, I've never hit it. So I wouldn't worry too much about that.
And it's a per user limit. So if you have, several seats, then it's multiplied by each user, how much of that data API you can use. So it's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
And if you've, sorry, go ahead.
Say, and you're talking a lot about the people who had existing work, and fmPDA like presented a path to be able to make that transition from the PHP API to the data API. But even if you're just never worked with the PHP API and you're just starting strictly with the data API, this just simplifies all of the functionality of grabbing the token and storing the token and figuring out, like, that was the big difference between the PHP API and the data API is that use of a token. And I know when I first started exploring using the data API, I watched a bunch of tutorial videos and explained all about how to do the coding to retrieve that token and to store it and how to reuse it and all that kind of stuff. And it was just way over my head. And I was like, oh my God, this is so complicated to try and just build a simple interface with a website. And then the fmPDA, what that basically allowed for and presented, it said, okay, you don't have to worry about any of that. Don't even worry about that. Here's here's a bunch of PHP classes that say, if you want to get a record, here's just plug this stuff in. And man, it simplified that process so much. You know, for me, the project that I've used it on is about 30 different users. And the first use case that came along was just, you know, the owner going, okay, is there some way we can take payments for invoices that can go directly into the database instead of having people call them in or having them go through a third party? And then we get like a user in the office has to go and look up all the people that paid on this system and then manually plug them into the FileMaker system and all that kind of stuff. So it allowed us to create basically a web page invoice that we can email a link to our customers, and they just pull up the invoice online and make the payment, and it records that payment directly into FileMaker. And that was such a game changer. You know, it's such a simple piece of the puzzle. It's a small piece of the puzzle, but it was a huge piece of the puzzle. So that's the
Right. You're spending more time on your own code rather than trying to build that layer underneath.
Yes.
And getting it to talk back and forth.
Yeah.
And yeah, the token management thing, it's, excuse me, the API takes care of all that. Whenever you make your call up here and it gets down here and we try it, if we have a token, we try it. And if the server then says, nope, that token is no good, it quietly goes and gets a new one and then reissues the call and then returns back up to you. So you just see one call being made, but there's probably 2 or 3 calls sometimes behind the scenes being made. But again, you don't have to worry about that. And then the system holds that token.
Yeah, it's all seamless when it comes to, you know, as just the developer working with, how can I connect my FileMaker database to the web pages? It's like all of that stuff becomes seamless, and it's nice to know about it, but it's not necessary. Like, I don't even need to know what's going on behind the scenes in order to use all this. So.
Right. And, you know, the beauty is this is all open source, so you can do whatever you want with it. If you want to change the code, go to town on it. And the beauty is I haven't really had to make too many changes over the years, which is great. So it's a stable code base. There's been a few random bugs here and there we fixed, but for the most part, it is what it is. There are, you know, it's not bare metal REST API code that you're talking to, and there are certainly other packages out there that do talk to the data API in PHP and virtually every other language out there. So this is not the only game in town. If you're just wanting to talk to the data API, I think there is one other package that does the higher level like I do, I think. But so you might have 2 games in town to deal with. But, you know, it's free, it's open source. And if it helps you write your code, yay. And again, I use this every day. I got production code that runs all the time using this code. Sometimes there's one server process that runs every minute using this. So it's just constantly chugging away.
Yeah, we through the system that I put in, we, you know, I think it's something like $10,000 to $20,000 worth of payments processed per week. So it's being hit all the time, every day, and works beautifully. So
the other little kind of part to this, which is very underlying code base, is the FM curl class, which all the other classes sit on top of. So if you just need to make a curl call to whatever, not FileMaker Data API or anything like that, it's all built in right here. And there is a demo. So like here, I just want to get example.com. Well, there's the HTML it just pulled back. So, I mean, internally, that's what all the data API code is using, is this class to actually get the data from a server. So you can always use this directly if you just need to hit some server for random data. And downloading a file. This is what Ron, internally, the code's actually doing. You can see all the cookie jar stuff going on.
Yeah.
The retry stuff. That was a fun method to write. But it works now, and so you can use it just for wherever. It's not specific to FileMaker in any stretch.
Yeah, at one point I actually had was working on the ability to download a file from the FileMaker database, and I was able to get the file, but I wasn't able to rename it. So I still,
The file naming thing is you're getting this weird name from the server. It's not what is inside the container. Yeah. You have to typically create another field in your database, in your table, that is the file name that you want, and have that come down with you, and then you can save it off at that point. And in fact, right here, actually, no, I have an example of that, but in the demo code, there is a way to do that too. So,
Can I ask a question here?
absolutely.
You mentioned curl. FileMaker curl as implemented is limited to read only. Very handy to have in a lot of environments. Can we do post or write to using curl with your software?
see right there, because again, this is what all the data API code up high uses for reading and writing data. So, some of the calls are to the REST API or GET. Some are put, post, fetch, delete, just depends. So this class, excuse me, supports them all. So
Interesting.
it's just a handy little class. It was nice to just break that out as a base class that everything else needed, and then you could just use it on your own. So,
Thank you.
I use that all the time for other stuff too. I try to eat my own dog food.
Yeah, that was a great question, Stephen. Because that does come up.
And where did you hear that eat your own dog food expression from?
I was telling people that at work, saying that, and people were like, "What? Where'd that come from?" And I'd forgotten, but it was actually a Microsoft product manager way back who made some random comment about, "You see, we even eat our own dog food here," about using their own Microsoft products.
Interesting, because Bill Appling at FileMaker used it for decades, and he even mentioned it at a couple DEF CONs.
It's a funny quote.
Yeah, I've heard it
Yeah,
in the FileMaker community before through, I think, different presentations or something. I've heard it before the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually I try to live by that as well. As a matter of fact, I have some solutions that are available for download on my website, and not only is my contact page on my website goes directly into my FileMaker database, and also we're downloading those solutions. The request goes to my FileMaker database, and then it runs the script and it emails the file to the person requesting it, and that's all done through the data API using fmPDA. So
nice.
Yeah.
I have a question, Mark.
Sure.
Having been a host for a lot of years, it was always typical for us to have the PHP server be the PHP server and the database server be the database server, and not have FileMaker hosting PHP at all. Is that something that you're doing, or are you just using whatever's there?
It works either way.
Yeah.
It does not matter at all. It's just it's just a bunch of PHP files. So wherever your PHP code is, and the back end, I mean, the code doesn't care. It's just, here's the URL that I'm hitting.
You're just pointing to the server where that data resides.
Right.
Okay.
And yeah, that's about it in a nutshell. And to go back to the FM curl class for a second, I actually use that class for talking to other REST APIs like Google's, and some other random ones. But it's just a nice, handy little class to use. I mean, it's just my preference, but you can certainly call curl directly yourself. But
cool.
I had noticed something that I'd seen in the fmPDA, the FM Data API stuff. I think I saw something like delete related records. That's a function it struck me as that's not something you can do in FileMaker. You don't have a script step or anything like that just says delete related records.
Where are you seeing that? I mean, you could have the cascading delete going on. The master record going down.
Yeah, you can delete all children records.
Right, if you did a find and delete.
Right, if you've got the cascading delete set, I don't know, I wish I knew where I saw that, because it stuck out to me that it was something that said delete related records.
That's not ringing a bell with me either, but there isn't a call like that as far as I'm aware.
Okay, I must have been imagining it.
Because there's, there is delete right here, and that's it. But that would do a cascading delete if you've got your schema set up that way.
Right. But it's not something that's independent from the PHP, and like you have to have cascading delete set up in the FileMaker database for that.
Or you have to call the related.
Right.
Right.
Or you could call a script that would do that, any number of ways.
Yeah. But if you're on a parent record, you've got the foreign key for the children, so you can just find for those records with the foreign key.
I found it. It's under optional parameters. For most calls, there's a parameter delete related. Down towards
so there is. Wow. I even wrote this. I think I remember this.
So I wasn't hallucinating.
Let's see here. Maker.
Cool.
I'm Googling right now. Remember what it was all about.
Array table.
I mean, forgive me, I wrote this 6 years ago.
I think we all know how that goes. I can't hardly pull apart what I wrote a month ago.
That didn't really give me what I wanted.
Because the data API does have portals.
Correct.
Part of the JSON, yeah.
Delete. Oops.
And it would be array.
I tried searching the FileMaker 18 data API guide on their website and searched for delete related and found nothing. So that's not going to be useful. That's a good question. I'm not sure I have an answer for you, Ron, right now. From what I wrote here, it made it look like you were kind of targeting a specific table and record ID, rather than any sort of cascading effect. That had to have been in there. Sorry, Beverly, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that's if you've got the call in their portal records coming back in the JSON, then that seems like it's a flag to allow that, because it would be in the JSON.
Right. I mean, you've already got the IDs of all the portal records, so it's like you could have just easily as well done a specific delete on that table with that record ID.
Right.
Potato. There may be some subtle difference in there as well, but there are many ways to skin this cat, clearly.
Yeah. Cool. Ron, you were saying that you had to go and change something in several files. What was that?
Oh, just in order to get the demo up and running, you've got to specify your database host, and
it's this file right there.
But it's only one place that has to be changed?
It's actually where it says V0, V1, V2. There's one of those. Why is there a 0, 1, and 2? Is it just...
So 0 was the pre-release data API that came out eons ago, and then it timed out. It only worked up until a certain date, and your code just wouldn't work anymore. And people were using it, and so I just left it in there.
Gotcha. So it's for legacy stuff. So
right, and then V1 came along, and then V2 came along, which wasn't that much different. But that's why I also created V latest, which the data API supports.
Right.
So you could write your code to just grab the latest and be done with it and not worry about it.
So really for the demo files, you probably just need to do V2, is that correct? Or do any
Or
other-
V latest. Yeah, I mean, yeah, right. There's nobody is using V0. You'd have to be screwing with your
Right.
clock on your server. And V1, that's like 17 or earlier FileMaker version. So
Mark, click on that hosting.
I can't.
Oh, okay.
Because it's got the username and password in there, and it's
Ah,
on a server here. I
Oh,
can't show you.
okay, okay.
Otherwise, I would.
Yeah.
But if you
okay.
download
No,
the demo
yeah,
files,
yeah, I'll look at it. But it seems like if you've got an entire setup and you're already accessing the database, that you've got session variables or something that you've got set up, and you already have those set up when you start your application, and then you include this, it seems like you could pass those along instead of hard coding them.
there are many ways one can do this. And
Yeah, because
hard coding in
typically
the
that's
file
the
is,
way it is. Typically the way it is that you put it above the web root for anything like that.
yeah, or
And it's
environmental
able to,
variables.
yeah, and it's able to be included in whatever you're calling, so it's not hard coded. So,
Right.
okay,
for
cool.
this demo, I couldn't do that. So because I want to
Yeah.
make sure that everybody could just download this and run with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, security wise, you definitely would want to put this higher up out of the web root, or use other means of getting the data,
Yeah.
other databases that pull it in. There's lots of different ways. It's the whole
Okay.
thing about storing API keys anywhere or any account credentials. It's always a dangerous game. And I once actually did click on that during a demo and quickly had to go change the password.
I'll be honest
So-
with you, when I was going through that whole learning curve transition, trying to learn how to do all this stuff, I got really hung up on trying to put all that into the environmental variables instead of into a hard-coded PHP page. And I mean, it gets difficult, like to set up your local development server to be able to access the environmental variables. Like I really just stumbled with that I probably lost months to just trying to, because I only worked on it when I had some spare time to get back to it, but I lost probably months just being stuck on environmental variables. And then I realized, because I was looking into how to integrate with like WordPress. And as I was kind of looking through the WordPress stuff, I realized that all of your credentials in WordPress are stored in a PHP file. So
Yeah.
so I kind of thought, well, if it's not that, if that's an acceptable security risk for the WordPress, which is used in millions of websites around the world, then maybe it's okay to put it in a PHP page.
But where is it
Outside the
in
root.
relation to the web root?
Yeah, outside of the root. So
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's always, you got to at least put it outside the web root, if nothing else. So, there are, if you look through the demo files in here, you will find a few more files that are just random. They're variations of the things that are in the web page versions.
Cool.
It's sometimes just nice to have them in there to check. Like this one is where you can not translate the data as it comes back. Sometimes you really want just the raw data coming. Because otherwise the data API is sometimes doing a little translation on the data coming back for you. Because like line feeds, carriage return line feeds, that was a big thing between the data API and the old PHP API, what a line ending was.
Right.
So we had to do a little twisting and turning on that.
Because sometimes when you make a call, you just want that raw JSON because you're going to maybe process it with a script once it's back in the database.
Right.
Yeah.
It's got another destination than
Yeah.
just your PHP code.
Cool.
So that's always nice. Just have that in there.
Yeah. Cool.
Data examples. Yeah, this is the metadata thing was kind of cool. They finally added that in 18. You would get much more information about the structure of your layout and the stuff that was on it, which the first cut did not have it, and it was frustrating to some people because they had relied on that code working. Excuse me, in the higher level PHP API code. So that got added in version 18, and there was much rejoicing for some people.
Nice reference. There was much rejoicing.
I had one person call me or email me and say, "Thank you for finally adding this." I'm like, "Well, I didn't really add it. FileMaker got around to doing it, but thank you anyways." So again, I can ramble on here forever, but the log feature, I use that personally just in my own code, regardless of the data API, because it's just a class called fmLogger that's built in there. And it's just very useful to be able to dump my own data in there. It gets a little tricky when you're doing AJAX calls because it's stored in a session variable and it lags behind essentially the session. But there are ways around that too as well. And again, if something's not working right, looking in the logging code is going to tell you really what is not right. You can see, let me log out for a second. Okay. So if I just want to log into the data API, actually, I'm going to do I'm not logged in now, so there's no session token at all. And I'm just going to do a simple get record right here. Or well, we'll do two, but whatever. And when you look at the log that comes through here, the first thing we try to do is get record one. And the data API comes back and says, yep, nope, no token. And there's the error. And so it immediately then goes out and requests a new token. Behind the scenes, your code hasn't even detected this. And there's the token. And then the code internally again makes the same call. And now wonderfully we get the data back. Yay. And again, your call is just, all you've done up here is that. And all that stuff behind the scenes happened to get the token. And you're off to the races. So very handy. And of course, I've just exposed a token to the internet and it's on YouTube, but that token will die before this gets onto YouTube. So, or wait, even better. No more token. Nobody's using that to get in there anymore. So, other questions, comments? Okay.
I was just noticing that the log out, I guess I was thinking about, that might be something I should be doing with my, the customer pays their invoice and when they're done, I should probably have a log out in that, shouldn't I? Or, so I've noticed sometimes I see in the admin control panel for the server, like that API connection will be there for like 15 minutes.
Yep.
Is that basically
about that?
Yeah.
If they have a log out button on the web page, you definitely should log them out, I guess. I mean, you don't have to, but if there's any security involved, it's probably best.
Yeah.
But again, you want to stop that thrashing of, I need a piece of data, so I'm going to go create a new token and then log out, and then 30 seconds later do it again. That's where the server is going to be groaning at you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and for the most part, you don't want to try to, they say time the token, but like, I know it's going to be there in 15 minutes. It may not be. It could be longer, it could be less. You don't know. The server might restart until the token is wiped out. And some other packages do put code in saying, okay, it's been 15 minutes. I'm going to just go get a new token. And I didn't take that approach. It's just like, I throw the token at the server. If it comes back and says it's bad, we ask for a new one and just leave it at that.
Cool.
Beverly, you're about to say something?
Yeah. You said something about the admin API as a part of this. Did I hear that right, or was I?
Yeah, it's version 1 of the admin API. So it's a little old. I have not updated this code in.
Okay.
So version 2 is much more robust, and they changed the methodology of how the calls were made.
Okay.
Because I don't know if you recall, but the way I think there were two different teams at FileMaker that were doing data API and admin API. And so their authentication schemes to talk to the server were different. And
Right.
it was a little frustrating that we had to kind of write two different pieces of code just to authenticate the same way. So version 1 is kind of a different beast than, but I mean, your code up at this level is the same, and underneath I figured it all out to smooth it all over.
Cool.
But there hasn't been really a lot of need for people to use this code with an admin API because again, they're much better tools. This was more of a demo than anything.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
But I mean, go play with it, have fun. I think I used it once for like sending a message to everybody, and it was kind of cool. But so I don't know if people have more questions. I'm happy to answer, or we can stop here.
I think, you know, the thing that comes to mind for me is, and with the data API is, I wonder sometimes if the whole goal of the studio is going to be to try and replace the data API.
I think there's always going to be a need for people to write their own code to get at the server.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Studio's got a long way to go to be able to do more than just
Yeah, because we're,
collect forms anonymously. Because
yeah,
right now, even if you're on a team and you're using some of the other views, it's not quite as efficient, and you don't have relationships yet, and you know, so it's still got some growing pains.
yeah,
We one use case which I have for the data is we have a FileMaker app, the iOS app. That's just a standalone offline kind of database, and it syncs with the server. But to make it truly offline and not ever have to talk directly into the data API, because we didn't want to do that, I created a bunch of web pages in the middle that the app talks to this, and then that talks to FileMaker server. So there's a little security layer in here, and we can manage the throttling of data. And so the data API sits right here, talking back and essentially returning data back and forth. And that's a perfect case where Studio you'd have a tough time obviously doing that. So
yeah,
They get
And this-
some of those connectors in there, and the communication that we're gonna have with FileMaker and Studio. If we can do that in some way, that might make a difference too. But
Yeah, Mark,
And-
please repeat why you implemented that interim web page again. I didn't quite
so
follow.
there were a lot of reasons for that. One was we weren't sure if we were going to continue to use FileMaker Go app, and so we wanted kind of a generic interface for the app to talk to, rather than directly into FileMaker server, because security-wise, we didn't want to have to create FileMaker accounts for these apps to
yeah,
talk to this. There's one account here that talks to server, and so all the
Oh,
security is
got it.
bundled in here.
Okay,
Nice.
Thank you.
So, I could go write the darn app in Xcode if I wanted to, and it would still have the same, communication protocol. Just easier. And, some people make the mistake sometimes of writing JavaScript and they hard code into JavaScript the credentials for their
Yeah.
account to talk to the data API.
yeah,
And that's a big no. So that's why you need kind of an intermediary layer somewhere that holds the credentials that talks to server, because you really don't want a web page to really hammer away at the server like that. I mean, you can bring your server to your knees if you're not careful. So
yeah.
having this thing in between can throttle and slow things down if necessary, and reject stuff it doesn't like. So it's a useful thing, and it does add a little extra hop in the data handling, because you're going from here to here to here. But this chunk can be very important. And the other nice thing is too, the app in the field, it's for construction workers. And sometimes they're in bad reception areas, they can't upload the data, or sometimes it gets up to here and then their connection drops. But we've already got the data stored on the server separately, and then later on we can still pull it back in without having an active connection around.
Mississippi Hardin Valley retirement board.
I think we've got some background noise from somebody.
Not me.
So getting back to containers a little bit, is there anything like, does the containers have to be encrypted storage? Do they have to, is there anything like that that has to be in place?
Nope. The demo database file, if you ever looked at it, is straight up container field inside a table.
Yeah.
Nothing special at all. And again, I try to keep it really simple just for demo purposes.
Yeah.
So it sounds like something about your configuration or setup there but I know you tried it with 2 different servers.
Mm-hmm.
Because now, are you doing this with the data API call or fmPDA calls?
FM Data API.
Okay, so just the data API. Okay. I mean, there's not a lot to go wrong in a way. But one of the things you could try turning on is the tracing code. And that literally dumps out this huge amounts of data, the raw exchange back and forth. You see like the, excuse me, the SSL certificate negotiation going on.
Yeah.
And that might give you a clue about what's going on, because you'll see the full dump of what's going on. That's built in but turned off because it generates huge amounts of log data.
Yeah. Yeah, what I'm showing is basically a broken link, but if I click on like open image and new tab, it comes up 401 unauthorized. So.
That's a cookie thing.
Okay.
And these are Windows servers?
Yep. Currently my local computer is a Windows 10 machine, and my server is it's a Windows server. I don't remember, 2019, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
But
of course, it works fine on the Mac.
Yeah, of course. And then I have my my live production server is on fmcloud.fm, which is Linux. And
Okay.
I've got a web page, web hosting with WordPress, HostGator, and I've tried all of those things, and I'm still, so I don't know where I'm running into problems.
Huh. Oops. This sounds like a cookie thing. Yeah, I would turn the tracing on and see what happens. It is buried in, let's see if I can dig it out here. Oops. Oops. Isn't it fun watching somebody debug code?
Yeah.
No. It's like watching paint dry. It's not jumping out at me at the moment, but we know he's talk about this later.
Yeah.
But turning on the trace code should tell you something about what's going on. And I have typically seen other people have problems with this, and it's definitely related to the cookies not going back and forth, because the server wants the cookie, and if it's not getting it, it just says sorry. So it's definitely one of the not great parts about the data API.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. And I know people have gone to other great links to work around this, that they one example is this intermediary layer. Is if you have that in there, you can make a call to that, or to grab the file, save the picture in a cache directory that is web visible. And then your code is just grabbing, and then your web page code, your actual image tag is just referencing the cached folder. And so it's nice and clean in that respect. And then if it's cached, it lives there. So the next time you're not hitting the data API again to get the data out.
Yeah.
Which if it's a big file, that can be an issue. Of course, there's things about security there. So you always got to worry about that too. So yeah. I've forgotten what it is now, but it's
Yeah, when testing, always have to make sure I delete the cookies, the cache, and the history to make sure that something is working. And then I can rule that out as the problem. And if it occurs again, then I know, well, it's probably that.
yeah, the well, again, we can take this offline, Ron, and figure it out.
Yeah. We'll follow up with it later.
Okay.
I got another meeting to go to. Thanks, Mark. It was great. Thanks, Ron, for bringing him.
All right. Thanks,
Beverly.
Bye.
Okay. I don't know. Anything else we want to chat about here, or
Anybody else have any other questions? I guess that's a no.
okay?
No, thanks for taking the time to prepare for this and really appreciate it.
No
Yeah,
problem.
appreciate having you here to pick your brain. And like I said, I'll follow up with you later about some specific things. But other than that,
Okay.
all right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and